So now we're going to take a look at my top tips for creating wider patches. Now, there's many different ways to create width in the Hydrasynth. I'm going to show you every single way that I know. And quite often I'll combine these, or maybe sometimes one of them is not available because you've used it for something else. For an example, what I mean by that is maybe you want to use Unison, but you want to create a poly patch, then Unison is no longer available. So I'm going to show you different ways to get similar results. So these tips, I use them in every patch. And again, I often combine them with the first two chapters, the analog and the drive. So analog, drive, and width, for me, these three kind of come together in a really, really nice way to create absolutely massive patches. So the first one of the most obvious ones, is in voice module, you can select Unison mode. Now, by bringing up the density, we add more copies of the voice in, making a thicker sound, and we can detune them. And I love the sound of that when you max it out. It's great on build-ups. Sounds like a swarm of bees. But the beauty of this is the stereo width. So we're making 8 copies. We're detuning them all so they're slightly different, and then spreading them across the stereo. Sounds more mono when you bring the detuning down, so the detuning is a big part of it. That pseudo stereo effect is because all of the voices are slightly different from one another, giving that sense of width. The other one that I want to show you is the poly width. So in poly mode, so poly mode just means that we can play a chord. What you can do is you can bring up the stereo width, but you'll notice that it doesn't always sound quite right in rotate mode because it's randomly rotating the voices round. Sometimes it sounds more left or more right. You can also use random as well. It's a little bit better, it kind of randomizes them. But I like to go to alter because I feel like that one's the most consistent. That's mono, and then we can obviously spread the voices. So what we're doing there is we're just spreading the voices out. That's another option. In this mode, if you still wanted that kind of detuned Unison feel, let me just bring this back on. The detune won't work in this. But what we can do is we can go into the mutants and we can go to wave stack. And I just think that's a good way of adding that flavor into it, because if we are in poly mode, we can also use Unison mode. We can only use the poly mode. So if we're in Unison and we want to play a chord, we can. So it's just a way around of getting some of the vibe from Unison into a poly patch. The next one that I wanted to show you is Oscillator Pan. So let me just reset this. Let's put this in to mono mode. And then what I'm going to do is take 2 oscillators that are the same. So we've got oscillator 1 and oscillator 2. And I'm going to pan them left and right. Now you'll notice that it just basically sounds mono still, but quieter. So what we need to do to make this work is to go into one of the oscillators and detune them. Same as when we did the Unison, detuning it makes it sound wider. There's got some contrast and difference between the oscillators. If we went down a fifth, that sounds like super wide now, because one's coming out the left, one's coming out the right. But we want them out the same, so I'm just going to add 30 cents. And then, actually, let's bring that down. The left one, I'm going to bring that to the left, because I want to detune these from each other, because the next tip is to bring in a third oscillator. And you'll notice that once you bring that third one up the center, it gives that sense of width. So I'm going to put this at the same pitch. And this only works if we have the detuning going on. As soon as we bring that detuning back in, it loses that width. It's not as wide now, even though we've panned through the oscillators. So you really need that different pitch in the oscillators to create that sense of width there. And then the next one that I want to look at is the chorus and flanger, and also the phaser as well. So obviously I've already covered these in the last course, but actually let me just reset this. They're worth pointing out again because they are really good tools for creating a sense of stereo width. So I won't spend too much time on these. I'll just go through like the presets, but you can see mono, stereo, and then you can obviously blend it in. Also the flanger, stereo again. and then phaser. They're the three main ones. You can use rotary. It does add a little bit of a sense of width there, but I don't tend to use that often. It just never seems to fit in patches for me, but it is there, and it does add a bit of stereo. So you've got them, and then the other ones that are often overlooked are the delay and the reverb as stereo tools, because with the delay, you've obviously got pan delay. And you can hear that they're getting panned left and right. And it's just having those different notes coming out different sides of the speakers. That's creating a sense of width there. And then same with the left, right, and center delay. So that's left, right, and then you've got one up center. And then also basic stereo works as well. It is mono until you move around the oscillator. So if we go to oscillator 1 panning, if I move it all the way to the left, and then the right, and then if I add a bit more feedback, you'll hear these trails moving across the stereo field like this. So if you use modulating the panning there, which I'll do later on when I show you another tip, that will create quite a nice sense of stereo because it's leaving trails across the stereo field. And then the other one is reverb. So the reverbs in Hydra are super wide. Room's a little bit more kind of like in the center, but the plate and especially the hall, they're like really wide, and then the cloud as well. So you can use them to kind of widen a patch. And then the last tip that I want to show you is if we just reset this. What I want to do with this one is pan the oscillators. So I'm going to use 3 oscillators. I'm going to pan them around the stereo field randomly. And when you're doing this, make sure that you're in mono mode, because I've noticed that in Polyphony, if I've got those 3 LFOs running at random, they all work together, so they're not moving away from each other. The point of this idea is that you have the 3 oscillators moving around the stereo field, but they're all going in random directions rather than following each other. So yeah, I noticed that was an issue when I left that on Poly. If we put this first one, if we set this first LFO up, so we're going to go for sample and hold, bring the rate all the way down, and put it on single trig. So every time we hit a note, it's going to have a different readout. And then I'm going to save and copy these LFOs across. So we've got 3 LFOs, all identical now. And I'm going to bring up 3 oscillators. So we've got oscillator 1, 2, and 3. And I want them to be all different pitches, actually. So let's go -0, -12, and +7. Got this nice thick, like chord type sound now. And then we're going to send LFO 1. We're going to send that to oscillator 1 pan, bring it all the way up. And if we just focus in on that to see if it's working. That's working. Let's bring up oscillator 2 now and send LFO 2 to oscillator 2 pan. Now you can hear them kind of like moving around independently. And then again, the third one, LFO 3 to oscillator 3 pan, bring that up. Now they're all moving around. This works really nicely when you bring on an arpeggiator. So now we've got them panning around. The next trick is to use the delay, but in stereo mode. So basic stereo, remember to leave those trails across the stereo field. And then a bit of reverb in there as well. And that sounds really nice. So what I'm going to do now is bring the filter down a bit. Add a bit of resonance. Bit of filter envelope. Just change the curve. So that's really nice and wide now. And if we take these down, Now it's more center. Still sounds quite nice. And then we could always use the pan delay to get that stereo, but I really like using these LFOs to pan those oscillators around independently. Obviously you lose a little bit of volume, so you might want to just bring that up. And then we can also, if we wanted to, don't forget we can still add like wave stack in there. And this could even be in unison. It might be a little bit overkill, but let's just try it. Let's bring the wave stack down. Doesn't really work as well when you've got the oscillators pan around separately, but I like what the detune does. So those were my favourite tricks for creating wider patches in the Hydrasynth, and next we're going to take a look at my favourite wave scan tricks.